If there's anything we can guarantee about your life, it is at some point you're going to feel overwhelmed. At some point in your life, for whatever the reasons, there's going to be more for you to do than you can possibly handle because you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, you don't have the money, you don't have the backup, or whatever. And so there's going to come a time when it looks to you like you're going to drown in your responsibilities, and it's worth knowing how to handle that when it happens. The first thing to understand is to say, yep, this happens, right? It's perfectly okay that you end up with more to do than you have time to do. It's not okay if that's a permanent position, because what that means is there are some things that you need to say no to that you haven't got around to. But let's assume that overwhelm is something that turns up at your place to visit rather than something that's come to stay and has got a room of its own. Overwhelm is basically an emotion, not a fact. And if we understand that overwhelm is a feeling, then we can decide to have a different feeling about it. We can respond differently to the stimulus. So the overwhelm, the unending list of things that need to be done and need to be done right now, is a stimulus, and our response to it can be different to what most people normally do. So let's have a look at what I think are the 7 keys to dealing with overwhelm. The first thing to understand is that 80% of our overwhelm is going to come from 20% of what's going on in our life. So it sometimes helps to find what is the one key thing which, if I took care of that, would take away 80% of the grief and the drama about what's going on at the moment and give you some time to handle what's going on. Now that might be work, for many people, if you work 9 to 5, well, there's 80% of your waking hours gone in that direction. Now, if you are experiencing overwhelm because of all the things in your life that added up, maybe this is a time when you take a week's annual leave. Maybe it's a time when you reconsider your career. Reconsidering your career doesn't give you immediate result, but it might help you to handle what's going on now, knowing that there's a change coming. Perhaps you're going to start to study the stock market or some other form of developing income, but looking at the primary cause of the stress, which leads to anxiety, which leads to overwhelm. In other words, how do we get to overwhelm? Basically, we allow stress to build up. We allow it to build up long enough for it to become background anxiety, and then the background anxiety morphs into overwhelm. So, as I said, look for the thing that's creating 80% of the dislocation, 80% of the drama, 80% of the uneasy feeling, and see if there's one move that can handle that. Hopefully there is. In my experience, if I look with a client for long enough, we will find that thing, find a way to take care of it. There's a myriad of those, and that gives us a break. Because what we need with overwhelm, more than anything else, is a break from the onslaught. It's very difficult to think strategically when there's a zillion things going on all at once, and we just need to get away so we can think a bit, but there's no chance of getting away. So my first strategy is to take my clients to, okay, is there that one big one that we can handle front on? Maybe with some, powerful, dramatic moves, but nevertheless necessary. There may not be, so we need the other 6. So number 2 on my list, not necessarily second most important, but number 2 thing to look at in terms of a process is, okay, are there boundaries that are being crossed? It's a pretty normal thing for somebody who's feeling overwhelmed to be doing things that they shouldn't be doing because they were unable to say no about picking up the responsibility of that. And typically, my wife Mary, for example, she was the treasurer of the local P&C association for the school that our kids went to. She was the treasurer because she couldn't figure out how to say no to being the treasurer, and she was still the treasurer long after our kids had left that school. It was time for her to push back on that boundary and say, I've made my contribution, and no matter how much you say you need me, and no matter how much you say you can't do without me. And by the way, she did preside over a system for organising all fundraising to be done in one day. So where we lived, there was an annual fair, and the local fire brigade and the local hall and the school got together and jointly fundraised by having a great big fair in our village, raise over 100,000 in a day. So she was hugely successful. Nobody wanted her to go, but she was so far outside of the boundaries that she should have set for herself that it was ridiculous. So where are the boundaries being pushed as far as you're concerned? Have a look at that, because inevitably, if you're overwhelmed, there are doubtless some boundaries that need to be kind of re-established, and that means a bit of pushback. Next thing to look at, number 3 on my list, is to challenge perfectionism. Most of us are being taught that we need to get things not just right, but we need to dot the I's, cross the T's, and get it perfect. The reality boils down to, we expect as human beings, I expect to be the perfect father. Not a good father, the perfect father. I expect to never make a mistake. I expect to be the perfect husband. I expect to never make a mistake. I expect to only ever make business decisions that work, to never make a mistake, to never have anything go wrong, to produce work that's only ever perfect, to not, for example, talk right now to the camera with ever missing a word. So we could challenge that. We could say there are a lot of occasions where 80% would get us there, and that would save us 20% of the time or the effort that goes into that. So perhaps it's time to challenge perfectionism. That's number 3 on my list. Number 4, look at your list and ask yourself, is there stuff that I can delegate? Is there stuff that I can outsource? Can I get someone else to do this? Now, there's a simple exercise you can do with that. Have a look at your hourly rate from your normal source of pay. And if that boils down to you earn $100 an hour doing whatever it is that you do, and I'm not saying 100 is good or bad, right? Just pick a number. So if you can get someone to clean your house for less than $100 an hour, that's a win, and you should have that person in there. Of course, a lot of people say to me, but I'm already spending 110% of my pay, so spending more to get a cleaner is not a good idea. And I'd say, well, maybe you need to kind of rearrange things so that you can buy time, because overwhelm usually is created by a lack of time. So if we can pay someone to clean our pool, pay someone to mow our lawn, pay somebody to clean our house, pay someone to come to our work and do some of the work that we do, then what we're doing is we're buying time. We're using money to get somebody to do something that otherwise we would have to put the time into. So have a look at what you might outsource or delegate, or in fact pay for, so that that frees up time for you. Number 5 on the list is challenge multitasking. One of the things that I come across constantly is people having a finger in too many pies or doing too many things at once. And so whilst they're taking a phone call, they're looking at Facebook and they're checking this message and reading emails and wanting to get lots and lots of things done all at once. It's a fallacy to think that you can change your focus from one thing to another rapidly and be effective on any of them. When it comes to being effective, find something that needs doing, block everything out, go for that, nail it, get it done well, and move on quickly. Now, the secret to that is to restrict the amount of time that you allow for the project. So if I've got 5 projects to do today, then there's only an hour and a half for each one, because I need time to change from each one, etc. So I get the first one and it's got an hour and a half and I've got to go for it. And at the end of that hour and a half, I need to leave that project and move on. It's got to be good enough as it is. So challenge multitasking. Next thing, challenge your feelings. In other words, the big thing that people feel about overwhelm is that they need to respond to it. Pardon our dog. We've just got someone going past who's got a dog themselves, and our dog's getting cranky about that, as dogs do. So, as I go back to challenging your feelings, because you're feeling overwhelmed doesn't mean you can't cope. Because you're feeling angry doesn't mean that you have to be angry. Because you're feeling sad doesn't mean you have to lose it. So challenge what you're feeling and ask yourself, is that feeling appropriate? Is that feeling relevant to the triggers and the circumstances? And can I change that feeling for something better? And then number 7, most important of all, how do you revitalize? How do you refresh? How do you renew? How do you make yourself new again? What activities work for you in terms of lifting your spirit? By far the most important is number 7. Challenge your time allocation in such a way that you regularly get into your diary significant periods of time where you are doing activities that uplift your spirit, because from that you will wellspring into and avalanche onto your task and achieve them in a whole lot better way than the way that you are at the moment.